When we look at our own lives and realize that, for some reason, we have few friends, or almost none, it's inevitable that an uncomfortable question arises. Is there something wrong with me? But the truth is that, in many cases, this isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign of change. It's a loneliness that doesn't stem from weakness, but from a different kind of inner strength. It's as if some people start seeing the world from a different angle. They feel the energy of environments, perceive falseness before it's even spoken, and recognize when an approach isn't genuine, but merely habit or convenience. It's not arrogance. It's not social difficulty. It's not isolation from inability. According to Jung, when consciousness expands, psychic energy stops dispersing outward and begins to reorganize inward. And when that happens, the person naturally becomes more selective. Certain conversations tire them out. Certain bonds drain them. Certain environments simply stop making sense. What remains often is silence. But not an empty silence. A silence full of perception, of presence, of truth. Jung always said that the human psyche functions as an energy system. He called this psychic libido, but not in the sexual sense that Freud used. For Jung, this energy is everything that moves our attention, our interests, our daily choices. And this energy doesn't stay still. It flows. It redistributes. It changes location as we change inside. Think of it like a dam. When you're living on autopilot, the water from that dam is being distributed to 1,000 different channels at the same time. A little goes to pleasing your parents. A little goes to impressing colleagues. A little goes to maintaining your image on social media. A little goes to sustaining relationships that no longer make sense. And in the end, what's left for yourself? Almost nothing. You become exhausted without understanding why. Because the energy that should be nourishing you is being wasted in places that don't belong to you, with people who don't see you, in roles that aren't yours. But when awakening happens, it's as if someone closed some of those channels. The water stops dispersing. It begins to accumulate. And with more volume, it gains strength. It gains direction. And that direction is always inward, never outward. This isn't selfishness. It's not narcissism. It's not thinking you're better than anyone. It's just the psyche reorganizing itself. It's the system seeking balance. Its energy returning home after spending years lost in places that weren't its own. This is where most people get confused. When someone is asleep, in the psychological sense, most of that energy is directed outward. It's in social approvals, in others' expectations, in the masks we wear to be accepted. Jung called this the persona, that image we construct to navigate the world without conflict. And it works. We fit in. We make friends. We belong. The persona is necessary. It's not possible to live in society without it. You can't be completely transparent all the time. It would be chaotic. It would be unbearable. So we learn, from early on, to modulate, to smile when we don't feel like it, to agree when we disagree, to fake interest when we're bored. And this isn't malicious. It's social survival. Think of a simple situation. You're at a family lunch. Your aunt asks when you're getting married. You don't want to get married. You don't even believe in marriage. But you smile and say, soon, who knows? Because telling the truth would generate a 2-hour sermon about values, about tradition, about what's right. And you don't have the energy for that. So the persona responds, and the conversation continues. This isn't fake. This is functional. The persona exists for this, to lubricate social relations, to avoid unnecessary friction, to allow coexistence without constant warfare. The problem begins when the persona stops being a tool and becomes the entire identity. When the person no longer knows who they are without the mask. When they only exist in others' eyes. When external validation becomes the only fuel keeping them alive. And it's exactly at this point where most people reside. Living through the persona. Building friendships based on the persona. Loving through the persona. And thinking this is real life. But then comes the test. Remove the audience. Remove the need to please. Remove others' expectations. What remains? Who are you when nobody's watching? Many people can't answer. Because they spent so much time being who others needed that they forgot who they really were. And this is where awakening lies. When you begin to perceive that there's someone real behind the mask. Someone who disagrees with the boss's jokes. Someone who doesn't want to get married. Someone who's tired of pretending. And that someone starts asking for space. Starts asking for a voice. Starts asking for life. But then something happens. It could be a crisis, a loss, a deep disillusionment, or simply an inexplicable exhaustion. And in that moment, energy begins to change direction. It stops sustaining the persona and starts descending to deeper layers of the mind. It goes to the unconscious. It goes to the self, which is the real center of the person, that core that was always there, but was covered up. The self is not the persona. The self doesn't need approval, doesn't need an audience, doesn't need to prove anything. It simply is. And when energy begins to flow toward it, the person changes. Not because they decided to change, but because they can no longer sustain the lie. And when that happens, there's no going back. Because the energy is no longer available to maintain the same relationships as before. It's not that the person chooses to distance themselves, it's that they simply can't sustain it anymore. It's like trying to force a plant to grow in soil that no longer has nutrients. It doesn't work, and forcing it only hurts. So that friend who used to laugh at the same jokes now seems distant. That group that used to give energy now seems heavy. That circle that used to be refuge now seems empty. And it's nobody's fault. It's just that the frequency changed. It's at this point that the process begins to hurt. Think of two people talking. On the surface, it seems they're exchanging words. But underneath the words, there's an energetic exchange happening. One is giving something, the other is receiving. And it fluctuates. Sometimes you give more. Sometimes you receive more. And when there's balance, the conversation flows. You leave there invigorated. You feel it was worthwhile. But when there's no balance, you feel the weight. You leave there tired, drained, as if you'd carried someone on your back for hours. And the worst part is that often the other person doesn't even notice. Because they were receiving. And whoever receives never feels the wear of those who give. Every human relationship is an energetic exchange. We don't perceive this day to day, but each encounter, each conversation, each hug, each exchanged message involves a subtle movement of emotional and psychic energy. Some exchanges nourish, others drain, and most of them exist somewhere in the middle, in a fragile balance between giving and receiving. The problem is that many friendships don't form from real affinity. They form from proximity, from convenience, from fear of being alone, or because both parties are seeking something they don't find in themselves. Jung called this projection. We project onto the other what we don't recognize in ourselves. And while the projection is active, the relationship works. But when the projection falls, the bond disappears. I'll give you a very concrete example. Imagine a friendship that exists because both feel like victims of life. They meet, complain, vent, confirm for each other that the world is unfair. There's comfort in this mirror. It's as if they were saying, "It's not just me. You suffer too, so I'm not wrong to suffer." This type of bond is powerful because it validates the pain. It justifies stagnation. It creates a kind of silent agreement. I won't demand change from you if you don't demand it from me either. And so both remain trapped in a cycle that seems like friendship, but is actually complicity in paralysis. But what if one of them starts taking responsibility for their own life? What if they stop complaining and start acting? What if they realize they were using the friendship as an excuse not to grow? The harmony disappears. Because what sustained that bond wasn't love, wasn't respect, wasn't genuine exchange. It was just a shared emotional frequency. And when the frequency changes, the signal no longer syncs. And here's the hard part. This doesn't mean the other person is bad. It doesn't mean you're better. It just means you're no longer in the same place. And trying to maintain the friendship out of obligation, out of history, out of fear of hurting them, will only generate resentment on both sides. Because the person who evolved will feel trapped, will feel judged, will feel as if they're betraying their old self every time they meet the friend. And the person who stayed will feel abandoned, will feel as if the other thought they were better, will feel as if the friendship was worth nothing. But the truth is, neither is to blame. It's just life moving. It's energy seeking new paths. It's the psyche asking for space to breathe. This type of relationship isn't rare. Actually, It's extremely common. Most social interactions happen at this level. People come together because they have the same fears, the same revolts, the same emotional addictions. And while these patterns continue, everything seems to flow. But when one side evolves, the other feels it as betrayal. Because the function of that friendship was to keep things as they were, not to transform. And it's not only with victim friendships that this happens. It happens with pride friendships, where both feed on judging others. It happens with competitive friendships, where both need to prove who's better. It happens with dependency friendships, where one always saves and the other always needs to be saved. Each of these bonds has a specific psychological function, and while that function is necessary for both, the friendship exists. But when one of them no longer needs that function, the bond loses support. So the person who awakens doesn't need to break with anyone dramatically. The distancing happens on its own. Because the internal support for that relationship no longer exists. It's like a bridge that collapses because the beams rotted. You don't choose the fall, you just realize you can't cross anymore. Few people talk about this part. And when you start observing this happening in your life, when you see friendships cooling for no apparent reason, it's natural to wonder, but why is this happening now? What changed? And the answer lies in the frequency you're vibrating at. Because each emotional state, each level of consciousness, emits a specific signal. And when your signal changes, you simply stop syncing with those on a different frequency. There's a scale of consciousness proposed by Hawkins that maps the different emotional and mental states a human being can go through. It's not an absolute truth, but it works as an interesting symbolic map. At the lowest levels are emotions like shame, guilt, apathy, sadness, and fear. At intermediate levels are desire, anger, pride. And at the highest levels are courage, acceptance, love, peace, and clarity. Hawkins said each level vibrates at a specific frequency. And when you're at a certain level, you can only resonate with people and situations vibrating close to you. It's like a radio. If you're tuned to 90 FM, you won't pick up what's playing on 105 FM. It's not that it doesn't exist, it's that you're not on the right frequency. Most people live oscillating between the levels of fear, desire, anger, and pride. These are the most common fuels of social life. The fear of being left out, the desire to be recognized, the anger at those who have more, the pride of being above someone. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not moral judgment. It's just observation. These levels are part of the human experience. Everyone goes through them. Everyone feels these things. The problem isn't feeling them. The problem is staying stuck. Because when you stay stuck at these levels, all your energy goes to sustaining them. You spend all day worried about what others think of you. You spend all night ruminating over an argument you had. You spend all week competing with someone who doesn't even know they're competing. And your friendships naturally will form at these same levels. Because you'll attract people who resonate with what you're emitting. If you live with fear, you'll attract fearful friends. If you live with anger, you'll attract angry friends. If you live with pride, you'll attract friends who also need to feel superior. And while you're at these same levels, all of this makes sense. You resonate with it. You participate. You belong. You find your group. You feel at home. But when consciousness begins to rise on the scale, something strange happens. Conversations start to tire you out. Dramas start to seem artificial. Gossip starts to weigh on you. It's not that you think you're better than others. It's that you literally can't vibrate in that place anymore. It's as if your internal system changed channels. And now, when you try to return to the old channel, you only hear static. You see people talking, but you can't connect with what they're saying anymore. You try to participate, but you feel like you're faking it. You try to care, but you can't. And this generates guilt, because you think you should care. You think you should be able to participate. You think you're failing as a friend, as a colleague, as a person. But it's not failure. It's change. It's energy reorganizing at a different level. And here's the crucial point. Rising on the consciousness scale doesn't make you more sociable. It makes you more selective. Because now you perceive how much energy is spent on empty exchanges, how much time is wasted on relationships that nourish nothing real, and the body begins to reject this. It's not a mental choice. It's an internal reaction. Think about it. When you eat something that's bad for you, the body rejects it. You feel nausea, discomfort, the urge to vomit. The body is saying, "This doesn't serve me. This intoxicates me. This needs to come out." The same thing happens with relationships. When you're vibrating at a higher level of consciousness and try to force presence in lower-level environments, the body reacts. You feel anxiety. You feel exhaustion. You feel an inexplicable urge to flee. And it's not being dramatic. It's not panic disorder. It's not social phobia. It's your internal system warning you, you don't belong here anymore. And this is where many people give up. The person literally starts feeling unwell in certain environments. Parties that used to be fun now seem too loud. Gatherings that used to be light now seem full of unspoken tension. WhatsApp groups that used to make you laugh now just accumulate unread messages. And it's not because the person became antisocial. It's because their frequency changed. There's a subtle difference between noise and sound. Sound has frequency, intention, meaning. Noise is vibration without purpose. And when consciousness expands, the person distinguishes the two with frightening clarity. They realize that most social conversations are noise, people talking to fill the silence, laughing to relieve discomfort, and none of it is real. The higher you rise on the consciousness scale, the less tolerance you have for this type of noise. Not because you became arrogant, but because the internal system simply can't bear spending energy on it anymore. It's as if you had a limited amount of energy per day, and now you know exactly where the exhaustion comes from. Every second spent on noise is a second stolen from silence. And it's in silence that transformation happens. If you're enjoying this content, you might also like our exclusive material that's in the first pinned comment. The channel exists exactly for those going through this. Jung said that individuation requires a separation from the collective, because the collective molds you, teaches you what to think, feel, desire. While you're identified with the collective, you never truly find yourself. You're just a reflection of the expectations around you. Individuation isn't rebellion. It's not wanting to be different just to be different. It's an internal process, often painful, where you begin to separate who you really are from what you were taught to be. And this process doesn't happen in the crowd. It happens in solitude, because it's only when you're alone that you can hear your own voice. It's only when you remove all external voices that you can perceive what's yours and what belongs to others. And most of what we carry isn't ours. They're inherited beliefs, inherited fears, inherited desires. And when you start giving all that back, when you start cleaning house internally, little remains. But what remains is true. And it's with this truth that you need to learn to live. But when psychic energy begins to turn inward, identification with the collective weakens, and this generates discomfort. Suddenly, you no longer fit. The jokes aren't funny. Others' concerns seem distant. The values everyone defends seem fragile, and you find yourself alone. Not because you wanted to, but because you can no longer pretend to resonate with it. Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." And this is profound, because it means every real relationship changes both people involved. It's not just exchanging words, it's exchanging essence. But how many relationships really do this today? How many conversations really transform? How many encounters really leave a mark? Most are just performance. People playing versions of themselves. And when you wake up to this, you can't participate anymore. Because you no longer want to perform. You want to be. This is the moment when many people enter crisis. Because loneliness hurts. Human beings are social by nature. And being outside the group activates ancestral survival alarms. Being alone, historically, meant death. So the brain interprets this distancing as a threat. For thousands of years, survival depended on the group. If you were expelled from the tribe, you died. The brain developed a powerful alarm system, the pain of social rejection. Studies show this pain activates the same brain areas as physical pain. When you feel excluded, the brain reacts as if you'd been punched. It's not weakness to fear loneliness. It's biology. A mechanism engraved in DNA for thousands of years. The problem is, this mechanism doesn't know how to differentiate physical loneliness from existential loneliness. For the primitive brain, alone means danger. So it triggers the alarms: anxiety, sadness, fear, despair. That's why so many people accept toxic relationships, empty conversations, draining friendships, because anything seems better than being alone, because the brain is screaming, go back to the group. But there's a difference between solitude and isolation. Isolation is when the person closes off from fear, from trauma, from inability to deal with the world. It's retraction. Isolation makes you sick. The isolated person is alone because they're afraid. Afraid of being rejected, judged, seen. So they hide. Build walls so high that no one can enter, and no one can leave. This loneliness is empty. It corrodes from within, because the person isn't alone with themselves. They're alone with the ghosts they create. Conscious solitude is different. It's being alone, but not empty. It's needing internal space to reorganize everything that's changing. It's not escape. It's necessity. It's the difference between running from people and approaching yourself. One shrinks you, the other expands you. There are people surrounded by others all the time, but who live in deep energetic isolation. They're at parties, in groups, in relationships, but they're not truly present, just occupying space, filling the void with noise. And this isn't connection. It's distraction. Conscious solitude is being alone and being whole. It's being in silence and being alive. It's not needing to fill every second with external stimulus, because the internal is already full of meaning. Jung called this withdrawal process descent into the unconscious. It's when the person stops seeking answers outside and starts seeking within. And in that dive, much rises to the surface. Old fears, stored pains, avoided truths. And processing all of this requires solitude, requires silence, requires absence of external judgment. It's like cleaning a closet that's been accumulating things for years. You need to take everything out. You need to look at each item. You need to decide what stays and what goes. And you can't do this with people watching. You can't do it with noise around. You can't do it in a hurry. You need time. You need space. You need silence. And that's exactly what conscious solitude offers. A sacred space where you can find yourself without interference. So if you're going through this, know that you're not running from life. You're entering it in a deeper way. And this inevitably distances those who aren't ready for that depth. Because depth frightens. Depth demands presence. Depth demands truth. And most people aren't ready for that. It's not their fault. It's not a character flaw. It's just that they're still at another moment in the journey. And that's okay. Each in their own time. Forcing a friendship that no longer makes sense is one of the most draining things that exists. You arrange to meet a friend, and in the middle of the conversation, you realize you're faking it, smiling without wanting to. There, but not present, playing the old version of yourself. The psyche seeks energy economy. It doesn't want to spend strength where there's no real exchange. And when you force presence like this, you're literally draining your vital energy. This explains why so many people feel social anxiety today. It's not fear of people. It's the body rejecting places where you no longer belong. It's the psyche saying, this doesn't serve me. And respecting that isn't selfishness, it's self-care. But we were taught the opposite. We were taught that saying no is rude, that refusing an invitation is offensive, that distancing is betrayal. So we stay trapped in a cycle of guilt. We accept things we don't want to accept. We go to places we don't want to go. We spend time with people we don't want to see. And all of this has a cost. A deep psychic cost. Because every time you betray yourself to please others, you lose a piece of your integrity. And when you lose enough integrity, you lose yourself completely. The problem is we were taught to prioritize external harmony, to not disappoint anyone, to always be available. And all of this has a cost. The loss of yourself. Internal betrayal. Because every time you accept something you don't want to accept, every time you smile when you don't feel like it, every time you stay when you wanted to leave, you're telling your interior, you don't matter. And this creates a deep crack between who you are and who you appear to be. Jung called this betrayal of the self. It's when the persona becomes so strong that the person forgets there's someone real behind the mask. And living like this makes you sick. Creates depression, anxiety, existential emptiness. Because deep down, the person knows they're living a lie. But breaking with this hurts. It means facing the fear of being rejected, of seeming strange, of being judged as arrogant, distant, difficult. And these fears are real. Because when you stop adapting, people start to find you strange, to ask what happened, to demand the old version of you. And the social cost of this is concrete. You start receiving fewer invitations. People stop calling you. Groups go silent when you enter. You notice the looks, the energy shift when you arrive. And people talk. So-and-so is acting weird. She thinks she's better than everyone. He became antisocial. And all of this reaches you, directly or indirectly. And it hurts. Because you're not trying to be better than anyone. You're just trying to be true. But truth makes people uncomfortable. It exposes in others what they also feel, but don't have the courage to acknowledge. So they attack. Not out of malice, but out of self-defense. Because if you can free yourself, that means they could too. And that's a threat. Liberation requires responsibility, and responsibility frightens. So it's easier to judge you, to exclude you, to label you as the problem. And you're in the middle, having to choose. Do I go back to please, or do I continue alone? If you give in, you return to prison. You apologize for having changed. You try to fit in again. You force smiles, accept invitations you don't want. And for a while, it seems to have worked. People accept you again. The invitations return. But you don't return. Because now you know. You know the price you're paying. You feel the internal betrayal happening in real time. And this corrodes. This makes you sick. This kills from within. But if you stand firm, you go through the pain of judgment and reach the other side. And there exists internal coherence. The feeling that who you are inside and who you show outside are the same person. And this coherence is worth more than any social approval. Because it doesn't depend on anyone. It doesn't fluctuate. It's there. Solid. True. Yours. Yes, you'll lose people. Yes, you'll be judged. Yes, you'll go through moments of doubt where you'll wonder if it wouldn't be easier to go back. But when you experience coherence, when you feel the relief of not having to pretend, when you wake up in the morning and recognize yourself in the mirror, you realize it was worth it. Because in the end, the question isn't how many people accept you. The question is, do you accept yourself? And if the answer is yes, the rest is secondary. There are people who will judge you for having few friends. They'll say you're too selective, too demanding, too difficult. And in part, it might even be true. But the question isn't whether you're selective. The question is, selective in the name of what? If you're selective to protect your own energy, to preserve your own truth, to honor your own path, then that's not a defect. It's wisdom. Jung said the path of individuation is always narrow. It's not a path of multitudes. It's not a path where you find easy support. It's a solitary path, yes. But it's the only path that leads to yourself. And on this path, you'll lose people. Not because they're bad, not because you're better, but because the paths are different. And trying to drag someone onto your path or trying to return to someone else's path only generates suffering. Awakening doesn't promise you'll have more friends. It doesn't promise you'll be more loved. It doesn't promise life will get easier. What it promises is truth. And truth, often, is lonely. Because few people are willing to pay its price. This price is giving up the illusion of belonging. It's accepting that you won't please everyone. It's understanding that some people will find you strange, cold, distant. And that's okay. Because their opinion doesn't define who you are. What defines who you are is the relationship you have with yourself. And when that relationship is solid, when you respect yourself, when you listen to yourself, when you honor yourself, the need for external validation diminishes. It doesn't disappear completely because we're human, but it diminishes. And in that space that opens up, something new emerges. Real presence. Presence isn't being with many people. Presence is being whole where you are. It's not being divided between who you are and who you pretend to be. It's not thinking about how you're being seen while you talk. It's simply being. And when you reach this place, the relationships that emerge are different. They don't come from neediness. They don't come from fear. They don't come from projection. They come from recognition. It's as if two people met and said, without words, I see you, and you see me, and that's enough. These relationships are rare, because they require both parties to be awake. They require both to have done the internal work of shedding the masks. and that's not common. But when it happens, it's profound, it's true, it's sustainable. So, if you're in this place now, where friends disappeared, where relationships cooled, where loneliness seems inevitable, know that this might not be the end. It might just be a transition, a space between who you were and who you're becoming. Jung also spoke about the transcendent function, which is the psyche's ability to integrate opposites. And one of the great opposites of human life is precisely this: belonging to the collective or belonging to yourself. And most people never resolve this conflict. They keep oscillating between the two, always dissatisfied. But there's a third path, which is integrating both. It's belonging to yourself first, and, from that place, choosing who you want to be with. Not out of necessity, not out of fear, but out of conscious choice, out of real affinity, out of genuine exchange. And when you reach this place, you realize that fewer friends isn't loss, it's clarity. Because now you know that each person by your side is there for a real reason. They're not there out of convenience, out of habit, out of obligation. They're there because there's exchange, because there's truth, because there's mutual respect. This type of friendship doesn't need constant maintenance, doesn't need daily messages, weekly meetings, proofs of loyalty. It simply exists. And when you meet, it's as if time hadn't passed. Because the bond doesn't depend on physical proximity. It depends on internal harmony, and this is rare, but it's possible. And the deeper you go into yourself, the more you attract this type of relationship. Because you're no longer emitting the signal of neediness. You're emitting the signal of presence. And whoever resonates with presence is also present. So, yes, awakening can leave you with fewer friends, can leave you more alone, can make you seem strange to those who don't understand. But it also gives you something most people never have: the chance to live a life that's truly yours. A life where you don't need to pretend, where you don't need to adapt, where you don't need to betray who you are to fit somewhere. Because the place where you fit is inside yourself. And when you find that place, the rest organizes itself. Not magically, not quickly, but truthfully. And in the end, that's what matters. Not how many people are by your side, but who you are when you're alone. Because it's in that place, in that silence, in that conscious solitude, that you finally find yourself. And when you find yourself, you realize you were never really alone. You were just preparing to be true. And truth, however lonely it may seem, is always worth it. Not because it brings immediate happiness, not because it solves all problems, but because it brings you back home. And home isn't a place full of people. Home is where you can remove all the masks and still recognize yourself in the mirror. Not everyone who distances themselves is lost. Some are just returning to themselves. If this content is resonating with you, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. Being alone doesn't mean being lost. Sometimes it just means you're, finally, on the right path.